started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
I am here with Michael Kester. My name is Eric, and you are listening to Double Feature. Today on Double Feature, we have two movies.
We do. We have Drive and Collateral, and kind of sleek L.A.
Yeah, there's a lot of L.A.
Sleek
that's going
LA
on today.
Rock stars of crime.
Perfect. And then we have spoilers and chapters. You
and Drive.
Probably already know about those. Drive, good. Good place to start. Drive is a sharp, artsy road film.
Yeah.
What the fuck? How did I not see this the first second it came out?
I did.
Yeah, I hate you forever.
You could have gone. No one was holding you down.
Well, when this happens, you have to tell me about this. Drive, man. Everything it does is surgically precise. This is what perfection looks like in fucking 16 by 9. It's amazing. It's not a Neil Marshall film. So
it could have been.
Here's what I want to
Almost
talk to you about. Someone had to tell me about Drive.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that I heard everyone and their mother talking about. And I kind of said, oh, why don't I know about this? And you and I had actually talked about Drive on the show.
A long time ago.
Fucking years ago.
Yeah. When I think, way back.
Clue me in on all that.
So we cover this director on the show a lot, Neil Marshall.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't remember what show. It might have been The Descent.
Probably.
I mean,
we were talking about the D films.
Yeah, we were talking about the D films
and
and how the next film he was doing after Doomsday was a film called Drive.
Yeah.
Starring Hugh Jackman.
Right.
About a stunt car driver who has a run-in with the mob.
Yeah. That's didn't happen.
This film.
That didn't happen. This film, so different director on here instead, but not one wholly unfamiliar to Double Feature.
Right. The director, Nicholas Winding Refn, or Winding Refn, I'm not even going to pretend that I know how to pronounce his name.
Right.
He did Bronson, which we did a couple years back.
Sure,
and he also did Valhalla Rising, which we haven't done on the show, which we're going to have to really tactfully approach if we do it on Double Feature. You mean
the opposite of the way we did Bronson?
Yeah.
Where we came on for Bronson and we said, I don't know what's going on. Look at all this art stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's a director that is as artistic as he is subtle, and his pacing is some of the ballsiest, most self-indulgent, wonderfully,
but again, perfect, right?
It is, but the thing is you really have to have some serious cojones to have entire conversational scenes with no dialogue.
Yeah, that's oh my god. This is one of those movies I'm going to have a real hard time talking about, especially for only 20 minutes. Well, before we move on from the director, the surreal scenes in this.
Yeah.
You're a fan of that stuff in particular?
Yeah.
Valhalla Rising.
And slow motion.
It's, man, that was a trip watching that movie. Sorry, back to Drive, though. The opening heist in this is so smooth. It's one of the things that sets up this character, sets up the film, just lets you completely release yourself into the film's control.
Yeah, absolutely.
You believe full on. I mean, it uses a little bit of the machete method we've talked about. Mm-hmm. Of, delivering something early in the film so you get this sense that you have a lot more of it than you actually do.
Right.
So in the beginning, we get a heist. And when I think about Drive, which is all I do between watching Drive, the longer it is between the time I've seen Drive and the time I'm performing this experiment, the more I will think about it as a heist film.
Yeah.
That's... More and more as I describe it to people, it becomes, oh, well, there's a stuntman driver, he's a getaway driver. And I think a lot of that is because it starts with this heist. You get a sense of who the driver is and what he does from that.
Yeah, and how good he is.
Well, that's the big thing, right? That's the most important takeaway from that scene is he is showing off.
He's the fucking pro. I mean, you get this thing. He turns on the baseball game. And you realize by the end of the scene, you realize that nothing he does is without importance.
Oh, that's the beauty.
That's the beauty absolutely, entirely without unnecessary triviality. And that transcends into, his relationships with the characters, particularly Irene.
Sure, well, kind of a metaphor for what we're saying about the film, too, right? I mean, nothing's an accident.
He doesn't say a fucking word.
Yeah, right. Well, so the baseball thing you're referencing is perfect because through the whole opening, he has this, and I love these little capsule kind of scenes too that just work perfect as their own pieces. You know, they're their own mini films. You're watching this, you're seeing somebody flawlessly pull off their job here, with the exception of one thing that doesn't make sense. He's been paying, you know, total 100% undivided attention on everything except for when he listens to LA sports radio.
Right, and you kind of get this feeling that it's just like every other,
hot shot driving movie.
Where he's like, yeah, I'm a really good driver, but only when I can listen to baseball.
Sure.
You know,
well, I thought it was, I'm such a good driver, I don't even need to care anymore.
I always think of it, you know, like, he can only do it if he's listening to classical music. They put the headphones on, and then you know what I'm talking about.
Well, instead, as it turns out, the crux of the whole fucking thing, the way it ends, is that he's listening to this game. The game gets out in perfect timing for him to pull in, mask himself among, you know, the chaos of everybody leaving. Just seems like a brilliant fucking plan, perfectly timed for him to. I mean, down to the fucking fraction of an instant. For him to pivot, step out the door, pull down the hat, and just take off.
And it's weird that you say that this is a heist film, like, foremost in your mind, because I remember when I saw it in the theater thinking it was an action-packed...
Sure, well, there's that too.
Heavy fucking
violence,
action film.
Yeah.
Then when I saw it the second time, it really struck me as a drama.
Yeah, that too.
And I think that's what follows the initial scene, is a long slew of you getting to know... not necessarily the driver, but where he fits in this catalog of LA humans.
You call him the driver as well.
Right.
I mean, that's his name. He is the driver. This is Two Lane Blacktop.
Yeah.
I'm already in love with this film. A protagonist with no name. This is back to Roadsploitation.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a lot of, you know, we call back to that, but we're also calling back pretty heavily to the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never had Roadsploitation and 80s married in that kind of new wave sense that I mean, in my mind, it's like someone created this film as a present for me. Yeah. You know, it takes this aesthetic I really love. The song Night Call that plays immediately after that opening bit. It feels, I mean, it's also perfect for the film. It feels really 80s, but this is not an 80s soundtrack. These are modern songs that are playing in this movie. That one in particular is by a French electronic artist named Kavinsky, I think is how you pronounce the name. But he does these EPs, and they're great. They intentionally sound like 80s new wave tracks. That's, you know, it's very deliberately what he's going for. And lo and behold, you find a bunch of artists who create this dreamy music or this kind of surreal music. This music, like you know, the things that attracted me to the Birthday Massacre, the 80s kind of sensibility of that band. You can find it turns out there's a bunch of these artists. Again, it's like another present to me, Michael. Yeah. It's like, look what I found and am putting on a silver plate for you. So we're putting those throughout the movie along with, I think the composer's name is Cliff Martinez, who does the score. And, you know, the pieces of score pretty much fall into two camps. There's the really, again, that dreamlike kind of stuff, the really, you know, using higher pitch melodies, higher octaves, and then the more low electronic, I don't want to say club music, but it's more reliant on a beat. So you have kind of that stuff that's free floating and spacey, and then the opposite side of that just, you know, relentless 4/4 kind of stuff. But you come out of that Night Call bit, where they're just showing the city. That's a lot of the movie too, is just kind of showcasing Los Angeles. Right. Which is usually a city I make fun of. But LA, in this case, it looks gorgeous. And suddenly he's a cop. Now you learn he's a cop. You can't trust that for very long. Right. Though that's, you know.
I love the cop thing is so brilliant because the entire opening part of the film, you're grasping for some idea.
It's a joke about his
of
enigma,
who you're
right?
following.
Yeah.
Right. And you see him dressed as a cop and you're like, oh, he's a cop. Oh my God, he's a cop who's also a criminal. Yeah. That's such a good movie premise. But that's not what's going on.
It gets even better somehow. Well, they throw away that premise and it gets better.
Well, that's the thing, is they kind of eliminate all of these kitschy. Yeah. By the end of the film, it's just a perfectly crafted film around a very basic plot.
Yeah. As the film goes on, it gets more minimalistic, and how minimalistic it is almost adds, you know, because of how well the film's doing it, that there's something deep in there.
Right.
And you just keep grasping for it. You're grasping the entire time. The dynamic between the characters, another reason we kind of paired these two movies today, you know, when you're talking about those relationships, one of the most curious ones to me is, I mean, all of them are. They're all weird and interesting.
Well, they're real is what makes them weird and interesting.
Yeah, exactly. They're incredibly realistic in how sometimes they don't make sense.
Yeah, they're imperfect.
You don't know the motivations. They're imperfect. The alpha male dynamic that's hinted at early on. It's more than hinted at. I mean,
the whole movie is really about alpha dogs and territorialism.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm thinking of the one he has with Standard.
Right.
So that's how he interacts with that family unit there and kind of becomes part of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of the things that separates this film, just writing wise, from a lot of other movies, is having something like that that's unspoken and just bizarre. Honestly, realistic and bizarre. You know, he meets Standard, and Standard immediately recognizes him as a threat.
Sure.
Goes back to that alpha dog thing, and, you know, attempts to stare him down. The driver, of course, doesn't care because he wins everything always.
He has that stare down thing, and I think that is, I mean, to go back to the alpha dog analogy, that is in nature. The staring down is such an instinctive indicator of the alpha male in a group, is the one who just unblinkingly will stare down any suitor, any competition, or any other, male force without being worked up. Somebody who's coming in and trying to make themselves look bigger, puff out their chest.
Yeah.
They're immediately showing signs of insecurity, while the driver is he knows, he is so secure in himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't flinch when people puff out their chest because he doesn't need to.
Well, and I don't mean to make everything a goddamn metaphor, but you look at that, and you talk about the minimalism of the film. When he says so few words like this, that's how he wins these arguments, by kind of being above them, not needing to engage. So it leaves the other person scrambling. It leaves less kind of holes in his armor for him to, make an obvious mistake or a qualitative. You can't judge, who performed better in that stare down if one person didn't say anything, as if they didn't need words.
Right.
The movie's doing the same thing, just all of these clean elements. It knows that it's doing them well. It doesn't have to really get, dirty and complicated for those things. But to go back to that dynamic, I mean, that's something that it could be drug out for the whole film. That sort of pissing contest between the two of them, right? Just over and over, them coming up in scenes and him going, well, I was gone and now you've invaded my family unit. You're taking care of my son and whatever. But they dispel that, I mean, immediately. And I don't want to put another film down for maybe dragging that dynamic out, because you would. Every film would.
Yeah.
That's just how you kind of talk about two different characters. And that's a fine thing. And that sometimes that's realistic. That happens. But this film almost feels like, okay, we've done everything with that. That dynamic. We're moving on. So instead, you have one scene where you get the whole fucking thing in, and then that dynamic immediately changes when he starts helping them.
Right.
And then Standard can't say shit about it. Right?
Sure.
What's he going to say? You know, he can't continue being an asshole when the driver is getting him out of this terrible situation. And that just so happens to further our plot as well.
That's a lot of motivation for the driver.
Sure.
I mean, it's this protective nature that comes out, and that's why, I mean, that takes precedence over necessarily being the man in the family.
Right.
Or being, the one that Irene is, with. His precedence is the safety of the unit.
Sure. Well, because he cares about them.
His precedence throughout the entire movie is the safety of his universe.
Yeah.
And he comes in, and Shannon says he comes in out of nowhere. So his backstory is entirely unfamiliar to everybody.
Getting a little vanishing point here.
And he comes in, and he creates this world for himself, which is probably some sort of brand new start, a fresh identity.
Right.
And he is willing to protect that in whatever sense in whatever that takes. You know what I mean? He'll put himself in danger to protect the new world that he's created for himself.
It leaves enough room for you to kind of ponder over it in a creative way, for you to try and think, well, where are those missing details? What is his backstory? I mean, that dynamic alone is enough to make you ponder over the film for fucking ages. But then you combine that with kind of his docile nature, or that, that vanishing point, no backstory kind of thing, that kind of classic roadsploitation thing, and suddenly you're wondering everything about him. Every little detail you get is, to be really analyzed, scrutinized, even just pondered over. The other crazy thing that does, though, is that when he says something, you're on the edge of your seat every time, because one, you're getting details, so you're just eating that stuff up. But two, when he says something or when he does something, in contrast to his normally, again, docile nature, he means it.
Yeah,
he fucking means it.
Entirely deliberate.
You remember every single thing he says
through
the entire film. You could recite every line
Kick your
of
fucking
dialogue.
teeth down your throat.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, so he's it's either something that shows something about himself, about the dynamic of the characters, or it's a burst of violence. It's sort of preparation. He recites the kind of rules he lays out for these people that he drives around. It's just one of the few times you hear him open his mouth. You know that it's important.
Right.
Once again, pulling back and looking at the film, it uses that same method. It lingers in scenes. It spends a long time in these different scenes. They can be quiet. People take their time. And then when it's showtime, the film snaps into action. It's the same way as The Driver.
Yeah.
But, another reason you wanted to pair these up today is you had kind of a concept about heroes and villains.
Yeah. Well, so when I saw Drive the first time, it was in the middle of fucking, Avengers season, and Thor had just come out and Captain America was on its way. And
right.
I mean, everything was a fucking superhero movie.
Sure.
And so I'd seen
the taglines
Drive.
for this are about, heroes.
Right.
So there's the song, obviously.
And I was watching it, and toward the end, I started to realize that this is absolutely not even, if you think about it this way. No, fuck that. It is a fucking superhero movie.
So talk to me about that a little bit, because I didn't even think about that the first time I watched it.
So you have this guy who has a superpower, an uncanny ability to drive.
Sure.
Okay, that's just as good of a superpower
Yeah,
as
why not? I'll take it.
a
Having a
truth
wrench and a red suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has this uncanny ability to drive. He has this jacket, basically the superhero costume,
The 80s
jeans
jacket.
and the silver 80s jacket with the scorpion and the sunglasses and the gloves. I mean, that's what he wears when he's doing the driving thing.
Right.
He even has a mask, the stunt mask that he uses when he's, taking down the bad guys.
Yeah.
And they use the phrase, the money always flows up. And eventually he goes head to head with, the crime boss.
Right.
He accidentally gets involved at a low level trying to protect civilians.
Sure.
And he ends up using his ability to, he drives a car off the side of the road. He crashes a car off the road.
Sure.
That is how he takes down the bad guys.
He's using his ability. Yeah, it's even more of a kind of superhero premise than something like, we saw The Punisher on the show way back in the first year. I mean, same sort of vendetta, revenge film, kind of. I mean, it's not really even so much a revenge film as, like you said, he just has to work his way up.
Right.
That's what this particular task requires of him.
And I think the most glaring difference is that when it comes to superhero films, your hero is always this unflinchingly benevolent character.
Right.
And I think the strength of Drive is that the driver is always questionably moralistic.
Sure.
Even though he's doing the right thing and he's looking out for the people who need looking out for, in the back of your mind, you don't think he's a good guy.
Right.
You think he is the protagonist in this situation.
Yeah.
But, you watch him stomp the shit out of the guy in the elevator.
Right.
You know that there's something in him that, again, the diner scene that I kind of referenced before with the kicking your teeth down your throat.
Yeah.
There is a force in him that is...
Yeah, he's scary.
It's not benevolent.
Sure.
His actions are benevolent and his motivations are probably in the alignment of good.
Sure.
But would I call him a good person? It would take a lot of figuring.
Well, and this whole thing starts to revolve around the mistakes of Standard. The first time I saw Standard, I did not like him.
Right.
He's kind of set up that way. He's the other guy.
Right.
You're not supposed to like him.
Right.
I don't think. He's
he's
in
the
opposition
wrench.
of the... Yeah, exactly. Otherwise,
Everything
things
is going
might have
so
gone-
smoothly.
And so we end up taking that surprising shift where, okay, our driver's going to not only defend Standard, but actually try and bail him out of the situation.
Right.
And so now even a character that we've gone, kind of a scumbag character,
Sure.
at least at one point in his life.
Right.
Our protagonist is now helping him out, helping out the crime.
Well, and the other character, Shannon, Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Fucking great in this film. But
yeah, sure. That should be said just really quickly. We're not going to have time to go over all the actors, but everybody's fucking
they're
phenomenal.
all really good. But Shannon is kind of, again, to play into the superhero thing, Shannon gets the mentor card.
Yeah.
You know, he couldn't fight on his own, but you know, he's Alfred. He's Uncle Ben. You know, he's
the code of Uncle Ben. Yeah,
he's the character that has the convictions but lacks the ability. He needs his own protecting.
Right.
And again, to promote the kind of flawed heroism of Drive,
sure,
he's also a total money-grubbing bastard.
Right.
And I mean, he, to a fault, to the point that he's been injured over the fact that he's just so in love with profit.
Sure. Well, there's a kind of fatalistic flaw to a lot of those mentors.
Yeah.
I think about about Hellboy a little bit. Maybe it's just the Ron Perlman thing, but also having that classic mentor figure.
Yeah.
Something that I think about, though, in you and I, a few of our favorite superhero movies is the violence.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be a common component. And Drive, when I first saw it, I had already thought it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. And then it started to get violent, and that made it that much better.
Yeah.
It was just one more thing the movie was showing it could do that I had not anticipated. And it was doing something where I felt like it was playing in my arena, in the area of a lot of stuff I watch.
Yeah.
And it was doing it just as good as the best of them.
It's different for me because I had expected the violence the whole time.
Oh, really?
Well,
that's
because
great.
I'd seen Valhalla Rising.
Yeah, sure.
And I knew that it was supposed to be Neil Marshall. I knew that somewhere in the script it had to call for a ridiculous amount of violence.
Yeah.
What I hadn't anticipated was that it would take so long to go off, and when it went off, it would go off so hard. Yeah,
so the first moment we get is, there's the bit with the ear previous to that, but yeah, Blanche, who's Christina Hendricks, everybody knows her from that one show, but the better show was Firefly. She was in she first showed up in that Mrs. Reynolds, I suppose, episode. Played such a good character in there, and so well written, and that's one of my favorite, especially side characters from that whole series. But first thing that happens is he gets kind of physical with her again, just reminding us not the good guy.
Right.
If there's not any good guys, I suppose, in this, only innocents. Right.
Sure.
But he has no sense of sexism. It's like you and I have talked on this show before about racism being comical to us because we're fortunate enough to have been born in an area where we never even really saw racism.
Yep.
So it's just humorous because it's such an absurd concept to us. But it seems the same way with him in sexism. Yeah. It's like he's unaware of it. He's hitting this woman like she's a person, any other person.
Yep.
And then you get that headshot, and it's again, it's minimalistic, but there's something so horrific, so graphic about it.
Yeah.
And part of it is the concentrated burst of violence in I guess the literal sense too, but you haven't really seen much in the film. And now here's a guy in the window, we're moving in slow motion, just slow enough for you to see the little flakes of brain explode out of her head, drops to the floor, last you see of her. Movie's great about that. It makes these great, that's the last time you saw that character. Fuck them, they died. Moving on. And you feel it with every single person. But it goes right from that to the hammer at the strip club.
Right.
And you're just thinking, this is not going to let up, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And, I love that scene, too. I love it because there's strippers in it. And the one thing Drive needs to be a perfect movie is also, hey, you're already 10 out of 10. Can we just sneak some nudity in there? Great, thanks. Appreciate that. But the strippers are just, we go back to that Valhalla Rising surrealism. They're just naked and frozen, staring.
Yeah.
I love that the movie continuously borders on being surrealistic. It makes sense that they would be staring down at the horror that just happened.
Sure.
But their faces are so expressionless. Right. And they're not flinching at all. It's really as if they're living statues. I want to talk about the color a little bit too.
Okay.
So, it's a loaded artsy thing, right? But the color does something pretty interesting in this movie. every frame of the movie, it goes without saying, is an art piece, right? I mean, that's something you notice just looking at it, is it's all framed, choreographed beautifully, perfectly. But even beyond that, it's doing this kind of David Lynch caliber of things with the color, where we've talked about him using imagery to further an emotion or a feeling or to convey something in his films. This is beyond aesthetics. Some of this color has a very tangible purpose within the story or the emotions it's trying to evoke, beyond just, hey, Rocky 6, let's put some crazy colors in here. It's digital. Everything looks cool. The elevator, perfect example. And this will be the only one I talk about. You can.
Well, I know, and I think it's perfectly characteristic. And I don't think that you're wrong.
Okay, good. So, we're looking at this scene. We just had a smashed head, right?
Yeah.
That surreal moment, smashed head, just influx of sudden violence. And then, she's terrified. This is the first time she's physically seen him react like this. And they're in close proximity. They're in an elevator. So what we need to accomplish in this scene is for the two of them to feel worlds apart. We want to feel how detached she is after seeing this brutal moment of violence, especially after they were just so close. So they were kind of having an argument anyways. He pulls in and kisses her, and then the violence happens. She's horrified. She's mortified. So the way the elevator is lit is to be extremely warm. He's standing in it. This is at the very end of the scene. And they're using the rule of thirds. He's standing in the left third of the frame. We cut to Irene, and she's standing in the garage. She's taken one step out of the elevator. They're maybe, 2 feet apart at this point? Still in such close proximity, but we want to feel the emptiness that's been created by the fucking head smashing he just did. So when we're looking at the way they color this, she's standing a foot away, but it's all cool colors. Beyond cool colors, she is dead middle of the 2-3-5-1, just giant open spaces on the left and right hand side. And you just feel that the wind is completely sucked out of her. And we cut back and forth a few times. I mean, it creates this place that is the loneliest place in the world. We pan back to him, still warm, total opposite side of the color scale. In the third of the frame, cut back to her, dead center, not even using rule of thirds, not even conversational. Something is wrong with this. It's as if the footage is taken from different parts of the movie. And then, we start to get this feeling like she might as well be miles away. They pull one more trick with the coloring of these two rooms and the cinematography, in that the camera is on her. We see her dead center. And then we have the warm door from the elevator seal off the cool garage. It's just, it's sealing her out of his life, basically.
And furthermore, what the elevator doesn't do is close from both sides.
No, it doesn't.
It goes from left to right.
It does, yeah.
Which, I mean, that's the moment where basically that scene decides we're going with the driver.
Yeah.
We're going from left to right. We're not going to the center.
So that's it. I mean, that's just like the previous scene I mentioned. We're saying, you know what? Last time they'll see each other, sealing her out, that's done. And, we move on from there. It makes a lot of choices like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, just in lighting your scene, think about how much that says that we otherwise might have had to say through exposition.
Sure.
This is what I like about minimalism, is it requires all of this thought up front, and it comes off as if it's simple. We didn't even think about it. Nobody even says anything. It's easy. You don't have to write anything down on the page. So, I mean, I could talk all day about Drive.
Yeah.
But the only other thing I wanted to mention is that this movie should not have been as well known as it was.
Yeah.
It's a fucking independent film. It's a character from the 80s in a film that evokes the 80s.
And a director from another country who only did obscure films.
Right, and it's paced and violent. And the scene in the elevator alone, not even just the lighting part of it, but where earlier before the violence, where the lighting physically changes in the scene and time seems to freeze, that scene alone should have disqualified it from a movie that people
from
I
lowest
know
common denominator.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
From a movie that people I know who see 5 films a year see. And the fact that it did well and that people saw this, I mean, this means a mass audience can handle films like this.
Sure.
Furthermore, it means that they like them. It makes me feel good. So let's talk about Collateral.
There's definitely something to say about Collateral that also appeals to, or maybe doesn't appeal to, a mass audience.
Yeah, well, so this is Michael Mann. That's kind of his MO, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever had one of his films on the show
No,
before.
I don't think we have either.
So this kind of seems up our alley. It's a director who he did Manhunter.
Now,
Which is people have emailed us about this all the time.
Manhunter is
right?
the Hannibal Lecter, the original Hannibal Lecter film before Silence of the Lambs.
Sure.
Starring Tom Noonan of House of the Devil fame. Also, Tom Noonan was in Louis, that was amazing.
Oh yeah, love Louis. Heat as well. Another Michael Mann
Kurt
film.
Russell.
Heat was
not Kurt Russell. It's
Al Pacino
and
Robert De Niro. Yeah, and that's that's probably his most popular film.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear people talk Michael Mann, they usually talk Heat. And we'll get to Heat in a second, but also did Public Enemies.
Sure.
Did this film, Collateral, with the writer of, this is where it starts to get crazy, right? The writer of Joey, the kangaroo film, right? The writer of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So you start to hear these movies that maybe you haven't seen, I don't know, well-respected film community kind of movies.
Sure.
And then you hear about, the Pirates of the Caribbean guy, so that's kind of interesting.
And then you hear starring Tom Cruise.
Right. So this is a thing that Michael Mann does. He takes these, he makes human-focused mass market films.
Yeah.
Something like Heat is a total Pet the White Cat movie if you haven't seen it. Films that seem really heavy and artsy and you might not get them, but you watch them and the villain fucking pets a white cat. You've seen this before. You get how this goes. It's got appeal and you understand it. It's more digestible than you thought. And that is Michael Mann. If you are afraid of him or haven't seen his stuff, it's very approachable. The idea is mass market. It's big budget action kind of movies, but doing it with, I wouldn't say it's character driven, but maybe character inclusive.
Right.
We're trying to go back to, it is action driven. It's an authentic action film.
Sure.
But it's character inclusive. It has these real people in them. I mean, he prides himself on having what he considers very real people. He considers himself a humanist and tries to include a lot of that in his films. The other thing I knew about Michael Mann coming to this movie is, and I don't know if I even realized this the very first time I saw Collateral when it came out, but for better or for worse, Michael Mann is a proponent of digital. He was an early proponent of filming things digitally, back when that wasn't something every single film did. The amount of digital films to films filmed on film is, it's starting to get pretty crazy. This was back in the days when Cine Alta was all the rage. Those Sony cameras we talked about previously on the show. I think we might have talked about them on Sin City. When Rodriguez was also one of the few guys coming out going, digital is the future, and everyone thought he was crazy.
Right. Which he probably is. Yeah,
no, all of these directors are crazy. That's fine. We'll talk about the crazy people we love to see in a second. Tom Cruise. But, that's part of his style. It's not the crazy, the digital. Maybe the crazy, too. I don't know. So when he did Public Enemies, you saw a lot of that is full on. Did you ever see Public Enemies?
Nope. But my roommate's in it.
Your roommate's in it?
Yeah, not Rob, not the Flags of Our Fathers roommate.
Yeah, this is something that was not only digital, but a lot of it has a very handheld look to it.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And I shouldn't pull any punches here. I'm going to be really frank. People hate on this all the time. Yeah. I'm not here to say...
That's what I've heard. I haven't heard much about Public Enemies, but I heard that there's a lot of hand cam and everybody hated it.
If we're really going to talk about notable things, Michael Mann, he's made a decision to stick to digital, and as he's done more and more things that are digital, most directors, these Cine Alta cameras came out, and people didn't really know how to make digital look like film yet. And over time, Rodriguez started making grindhouse movies. Michael Mann started making home fucking videos.
Right.
So he's somebody who's really embraced the digital style. When he did Miami Vice, that was his first all-digital movie, and, Public Enemies after it. People hated it. People hate the digital. A lot of people like it, too.
Sure.
But it's controversial. It really is. Shooting digitally, for him, I think he likes it because he can move around fast. He can do these night scenes. Collateral's not all digital. It uses a lot of different cameras, but you can see it in the night work all the time.
Right.
And it looks like the kind of thing, well, yeah, we can shoot handheld with this. We can just, pick up something and go. And who's to say how much of the rest of his creative process is impacted by that? So we should talk about the Tom Cruise thing. Everybody wants to talk about that, right?
That's what I want to talk about.
That's a crazy thing. It's a nutty thing.
And again, going back to the whole superhero, supervillain, LA rock stars of crime.
Sure.
I feel like Vincent is the absolute perfect arch nemesis of the driver.
Yeah.
I mean, just the two names, Vincent and the driver.
I know, right?
Vincent is this hardened killing machine played by Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's possibly one of the most human, real, dark, honest roles I've ever seen Tom Cruise play. And people,
Well, I don't know, man. We did Magnolia on the show. Remember how dark and human and honest that was? Now, people don't remember Magnolia. They remember jumping on the couch.
Right.
Why the fuck don't people like Tom Cruise? Explain that to me.
I think because he's a crazy person.
Now, you don't believe in God, right?
Yeah,
Still on the no God
agreed,
bandwagon.
Yeah.
You're a very science-minded person. One might say a proponent of science.
Yes.
How often do you watch Oprah?
0% of the time.
Do you read tabloids?
No.
Okay.
Not unless there's tits on the cover.
So you're not. So you don't, is what you're saying. Man, that would sell so many. Whatever. I think they already have magazines like that. My point is, myself, fellow atheist, you and I think Scientology's funny.
I think it's hilarious.
Fine. We like when South Park makes fun of it.
What I can say, the only positive thing I will say about Scientology is it's possibly the most interesting religion.
Right.
It's the one I would read.
I don't know, Mormonism,
the book
man.
Of first.
Yeah, I do have a lot of Scientology movies. I bring up Scientology not for cheap jokes, which is probably why everyone brings up Scientology.
It's what Scientology really is.
But the reason I bring it up is I feel like that's part of the reason people hate Tom Cruise.
Well, but that's the other thing is do you realize how many Scientologists there are in Hollywood that don't get lauded the way Tom Cruise does?
Yes, I know exactly the number.
And it's absolutely unfair because somebody like John Travolta, who hasn't done anything really decent since, 1995.
Right, except fool people into thinking he's making decent movies.
Right. He's still getting roles and being critically acclaimed for having the balls to dress up like a fat woman.
Yeah, well.
Meanwhile, Tom Cruise is producing Mission Impossible 4.
Oh, God, I know.
He's going out there proving that he's still an artistically minded human being that understands his role in film. And people are too busy talking about, his wife's water birth.
Every time Tom Cruise does a film, I feel like we can give him credit as an actor for this reason alone, if not how well he's doing. He has to have a career revitalizing performance every time he performs.
Right.
Every single movie he's in, he's such a big fucking deal that everyone goes, oh, Tom Cruise might make a comeback. It's literally almost every film.
Except for Night and Day.
I don't know what that is, so maybe I'm wrong. But maybe I only know the landmark ones where he had a bit part in Tropic Thunder. Everyone thought funniest part of the movie, Tom Cruise, everybody talked about it.
Yeah, but I think you're right, and I think that's what Collateral should have been. I think Collateral.
Well, it had that too. People said that about it.
I mean,
people
I think
say that about Mission Impossible.
I think Collateral was the definitive. Look, he's not always Tom Cruise. He's ditched. I mean, Collateral was right before Vanilla Sky.
Sure.
And
I think it was after. I think
Vanilla Sky
I
think was supposed to be, look, Tom Cruise can be a serious actor, but he didn't ditch the haircut, and people still saw Risky Business and Jerry Maguire.
So, I mean, I don't want to dwell on the Tom Cruise thing because I feel like I'm doing the film a disservice by focusing on it. But it just the same way we need to have a real conversation about how people feel about Michael Mann, because it's something I think people should know. I want to get to the bottom of why don't people, is it because he's crazy outside of work?
I don't know.
Is that it? Is that the popular resistance to Tom Cruise? I mean, we've talked about this on the show before, I think, with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
I want crazy actors. I want celebrities to take their money and do nutty things. I mean, I'm never going to say Scientology is a good idea because it's a fucking lie, and I don't think it's a good idea to lie to people. But if I'm talking about celebrity and I'm talking about people I want to see in a movie, I realize there are crazy people out there. I'm not interested in changing Tom Cruise's mind about Scientology. I just know, here's a guy who's kind of nutty in his real life. And I also don't agree with doing drugs. But pretty much every musician I listen to does a fucking ton of drugs. I want people who come from other backgrounds and who are fucking nuts. That's what I want out of my celebrities. I want them to be nuts. Mm-hmm. Or at the very least, I don't care what they do. I just want them to be good in movies, and I feel like he is.
So he comes out and does Collateral, where he's evil, he's conniving, he's mechanical.
Well, yeah, you want to talk about a good comeback character. I mean, villains make great comeback characters.
I mean, he's an absolutely mechanical human being. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't smile. His only joy comes from, the logistics of jazz. Not even listening to jazz like enjoying it, but the methodology and formulas therein.
Yeah.
That's his enjoyment. That and, I guess the money he gets paid from killing people.
Sure. Gets back to some of that precision. I think that's what he likes the parts of jazz. Every time we bring up jazz, it seems to be in that sort of spiral or aristocrats way, learn the rules, break the rules.
Free flowing, kind of.
We like the chaos.
And play what you feel and then don't play what you don't feel.
Yeah, right. He, he comes at it and he loves the structure of jazz. It's crazy how people can pull those different things.
Well, and he mentions he says the thing when they're talking about jazz where we're here right now, but who knows where they're going to be in 10 minutes.
Sure.
And that's the analogy of, the LA nightlife and
right.
I mean, it applies to Drive and it applies to this film for sure. Because I would say probably 10 minutes, I mean, maybe a little more, maybe 30 minutes after that, he's not even a human.
Sure.
His humanity is stripped when he's not trapped in a car with the most human person in the world.
Yeah, he becomes a machine. You start to see where he's all business. So in a similar way with Drive, everything this character does is informing him a little bit. There's not a lot that's lost, even in the action. There's, from the moment he tells Jamie Foxx's character, it's Max, right?
Right.
Tells Max to put his hands down.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting bit of dialogue, too. It just shows the extra care this film's taken.
Right. Well, and I mean, you get all these. He's been to LA. He hates LA.
Sure.
He talks about why he hates LA.
Sure.
And he says that thing that kind of, I mean, it ends the film. The whole, guy gets on the MTA, dies. 6 hours later, nobody realizes he's been, doing laps around the city. And that's what the film comes back on. But that is, I mean, despite the fact of its hamster style, that is so informative of him. He is just at the point, his view on death versus life versus murder is that at the end of the day, quite literally at the end of the day, when the sun goes down, by the time the sun goes up, who knows?
Yeah.
Like, who cares that person died?
Sure.
He says in the car, I die, you die, cop dies. Honestly, who's the wiser?
That's how he justifies this stuff.
And he talks about,
informs his humanity.
The massacres in Rwanda.
Sure.
And he's just at this point with death where he's just, I mean, people die, and when they die, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah. And I mean, he
unless
talks
you
about
know them directly. And that's
kind of the point that Max illustrates by going, well, but I don't know anyone from Rwanda. I don't care. That's all telling you how he rationalizes this stuff. There's billions of people in the world. Now there's one less. Not really that big a deal. So he thinks. I think that's all that matters. He thinks that doesn't matter at all. But you mentioned that when I was thinking about the hands thing. Right. In a normal movie, you point a gun at someone. They put their hands up because that's, they're not going to reach for a gun themselves. Right. But this scene knows, this movie and this character knows, cab driver, not a threat. He's a cold, calculated professional. Right. He realizes that a man in an alley holding his arms up looks like he's being robbed and will attract attention. Sure. So in that moment, he's demanding, contrary to every other film, that this character put his hands back down. It's just one of those little things to go, this guy really knows what he's doing. Sure. He's done this before. He's not just going to fall. It's one of the things that elevates a Michael Mann action film above a standard, didn't think about it too hard action film. Another glaring example of his professionalism before he turns into Killing Machine Vincent in the law offices. Although some might even argue that's part of his professionalism. Is that when those, I guess, I don't know, junkies try to rob Max. Yeah, right. And they take the briefcase. He does the 2 in the chest, 1 in the head. Yep. For both of them. Yeah, right. Without even thinking. I mean, that is his gut reaction to killing a pair of hippies. Sure. He and, Max, just informing Max all along the way. We're talking about him a lot less because he's a lot more obvious character. He's the human being. He's us. Absolutely. He's mortified by the killing, even of people who just robbed him. These guys just robbed him, and, Vincent shoots them, and he just winces at it. Well, as if to say, oh, more death, really? All the killing gets to a point in the film where
you can't help but root for Vincent because his mystery kind of combines with his charisma. And
well, he's got a task to accomplish too, and naturally you root for anybody that's checking off boxes.
Well, and furthermore, he's kind of got Max along for the ride, and you're hoping for Max's sake that he can just let this go smoothly and get out okay.
Sure.
Maybe learn a lesson from the whole thing or something.
Right.
But by the time Max guns down Mark Ruffalo's character, the detective, that moment is when you've already seen Max run out of the hospital room and throw the briefcase, and you see the rift forming and Max becoming the strong character. To go back, the alpha dog, he's puffing his chest out finally. We get this really clear look between Max and Vincent when Vincent guns down that cop, who is the only person on Max's side. And that is the moment where Vincent becomes definitive evil. Even his humanity is completely, it's unimportant in regard to what he has just become.
Well, because you kind of wonder if you're getting almost a Dog Day Afternoon kind of moment with how does Vincent and Max, I mean, how do these two guys, where is their story going?
Right.
And when it starts off, I mean, you mentioned shooting the thugs. Vincent was kind of getting retribution for what happened to Max. Not really, but in a cinematic sense.
Well, but even furthermore, he shoots the guy who's about to shoot Max when they're in the nightclub. He defends him outright. Yeah,
so he's kind of watching over this asset. He even has these conversations with Max, trying to motivate him to better his life.
He likes him,
making him talk to his boss. Basically, I mean, that doesn't help him. Maybe it helps him a little bit. You could look at it like a cold calculation. He's again protecting his asset. He needs this guy, I guess. But you also kind of wonder, well, is he protecting an asset, or is he helping a weird, reluctant friend, or where is this dynamic going?
I think that the entire dynamic between Vincent and Max relies on the inability, or rather, no, the super strong ability of Vincent to keep his brain separated when it comes to who's a friend and who in his profession is in the way. And that's why when at the end of the film they're on the train and Vincent is shooting at them, Vincent is ready to kill them both. No question in his mind, point blank in the head if he gets the opportunity. He reaches for the second magazine, realizes he's out of ammo, and immediately goes, oh, well, now I'm just going to talk to my friend till I die.
Sure.
Because Vincent's a friend once he can't be killed.
Yeah.
Once the job has ended,
yep,
Vincent just becomes a friend again.
Yeah, he's turning things off. It's almost robotic. It's compartmentalized is what it is. It's a more extreme version of something we all do as human beings every day. Michael Mann and his writer have basically taken this weird little human defect and made an entire character out of it, or at least in part. One of the scenes I really like that tells us even more about those characters is when he makes Max go in and basically pretend to be him, right? Yeah. Max plays Vincent. And you learn so much. First of all, you learn more about Vincent because you're still trying to get details there. So you learn about who they assume Vincent is based on that. It forces you to do that because you're going, well, how would I pretend to be Vincent? What's Max going to do here? But more importantly, it forces you to think about their differences.
Right.
What would the real Vincent do in this particular scene? It's like you're playing a role-playing game, right? I mean, it's a decision tree, the dialogue tree that's coming up. Every time somebody says something, time to decide how to play Vincent in this scene. And it also gives him a little opportunity to get the upper hand on Vincent by, shortchanging the price, and they kind of make that joke. Mm-hmm. But, the way he plays the empowered version of Max, that's not Vincent. Right. It's the empowered version of Max. So we have this dual purpose of telling you more about Max's character. If he followed Vincent's advice, that's what he would look like. He tries to be Vincent in those scenes, and in doing that, he just kind of reveals what the Max who wasn't driving for 12 years saying it was temporary might look like. I love that too. I love, is this a temporary gig? How long you been doing it? 12 years.
Yeah.
That's how those things happen. That's Glengarry Glen Ross again.
Right. Meanwhile, Vincent has been expertly killing people for a mere 6.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, isn't it? Well, that's why Max wins. He's the better driver. He drives better than Vincent kills. Why don't you give website?
The website is doublefeatureshow.com. The email address, hella similar, doubleFeatureShow@gmail.com. We have more films coming up next week.
Next week, we are going to do Party Monster and Heavenly Creatures.
Ooh, I like that. Watch more fucking film.
Bye.